Let me begin with a word of prayer to start this Eldian Bible series.
O Lord Isiyama, hallowed be thy writing in the ending. May the viewers understand the difference between animation and writing. Understand that good animation does not excuse the trash writing. Did I repeat myself enough about how animation is not the same as writing? Bless the ending hater hearts, O Lord Isiyama,
And all subjects of Ymir say, Eren. So let's begin. The rumbling was the consequence of the outside world continuing the cycle of hatred. With the final sin being committed at the festival, their judgment day was set, and all the outside world would die for their sins. But of course I might hear people say that Ramsay had no sin. Ramsay's grandfather did not burden his children with any sin. So if those innocent adults did not burden their innocent children, why should they die in the rumbling? Like what Historia said, innocent like your mother. The adult who never burdened her child loved him unconditionally. Why can't the sinful adults be the only ones to die? Since Cactus is Jewish, I'll use Christianity to explain. Because AOT has Eve and the first sin imagery, it shouldn't be much of a stretch for me to use the Bible, God, and Jesus. And for video's sake, just know that whether Eren is going to be God or the devil depends on perspective. Ready? By the innocent dying with the sinful, AOT would have been a cautionary tale of not allowing the cycle of hatred to reach such a destructive point. It all has to do with the cup of iniquity. Firstly, the difference between iniquity and inequity is the level of immorality. Hey Google, elaborate. Inequity is unfairness and injustice, but iniquity is wickedness and sin. The cup of iniquity. And secondly, what is sins of the father? It's biblical. The sins of the father being passed on to his children and the next generation. The children are punished by the consequences of his sins. Numbers chapter 14 verse 18, King James Version. The Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the sons, to the third and fourth generation. Different translation, Numbers chapter 14 verse 18, New International Version. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love and forgiving sin and rebellion, yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of the parents, to the third and fourth generation. In AOT, sure, we can see this as parody in Karl Fritz. Should Parody, innocent as she is, be the one punished for the sins of her father, Karl Fritz? I'll talk about that later, but you'll understand why I choose to focus on the outside world's sins instead of Parody. Now, the cup of iniquity. It's a metaphorical cup of sin. Sin fills the cup. Yet God still waits for sin to fill the cup to the brim and overflow. And it is only then does he unleash his wrath and cast down judgment upon the sinner. Why? Because there was still hope for the sinner to turn from their evil ways, to clean their cup of sin and be saved from their judgment day. Now, a specific detail is that the cup doesn't have to be limited to an individual. One cup of iniquity can be for an entire group of people, so the cup overflowing means judgment would involve their children as well. If that is the case, the responsibility of the adults would be to avoid even filling the cup in the first place. But if sinning is inevitable, then at least clean the cup. You can see this in AOT at the declaration of war. Again, notice the audience are adults. The cup of iniquity was not just a cup of Tybur, but for the entirety of the outside world. These people are their representatives. For the sake of simplicity, I won't bother with 1,700 or 1,900 years. I'll just use 2,000. 2,000 years leading to a 100-year grudge. Enough time for the cup of iniquity to fill to the brim. One more sin and they will be forced to finally drink. In AOT, even if he had the belief that Eren wanted to rumble the entire world the moment he learned of humanity's existence in chapter 85, it does not remove the fact that he was still searching and waiting for an alternative solution. Does not take from the fact that Eren waited for the last second before he retaliated at the declaration of war. Tybur could have chosen to not declare war, not continued the cycle of hatred. He could have chosen to clean the cup, propose peace with Parody. Cactus says, in a world where the other side is generalized, this personal identity is key. Each individual on each side has a right to live, each name is valuable, and each life is different. You cannot group everyone as an enemy or the cycle is only perpetuated. There you go, out and ending Defender's mouth. You cannot group everyone as an enemy or the cycle is only perpetuated. That's the final sin of the outside world that let the cup of iniquity overflow. By Tybur declaring war, he only let the cycle of hatred perpetuate. But if you still don't get the point, it's basically this. Stop blaming Eren for everything. Don't make it seem like the outside world was blameless.
It does not matter if Eren and Zeke were the ones who orchestrated the declaration of war. Again, the responsibility was on Tybur choosing not to sin. View Eren as the devil. Tybur still had the choice to not give in to temptation. But back to viewing Eren as God. God sent his prophets and messengers to warn his people of their sin. When his prophets were killed, God allowed his wrath to accumulate. God waited patiently for the cup of iniquity to brim. But we might say that Eren did not really warn them of anything, didn't tell them that Paradis did not want war. He wasn't the God that waited for peace, but the devil that rebelled against peace. Chapter 66, the Founding Titan is referred to as God, and given that Fritz's family had control of the Founding Titan. Chapter 99, Karl Fritz, the God, did tell the outside world that Paradis wanted peace. Now, given that Eren got the Founding Titan powers that made him God, do we know what the God was doing in the basement in Chapter 100? He was waiting. I'll elaborate on the basement part later, but let's continue. In AOT, 2,000 years leading to a 100-year grudge. The cycle of hate could have ended when the king retreated to Paradis. But no, 100 years for the cup of iniquity to fill.
And if you read the story, you would notice I'm actually being lenient with this concept, because there were 2 other events where the cup might have already overflowed. For example, since Grisha was the one that started this story, it could have been chapter 86 when Faye was murdered, or chapter 1 when Marley attacked Paradis and Carla died, and Eren swore vengeance. The reason I use chapter 100 as the point where the cup overflowed is because it's the event that had Eren waiting. Because even after Marley massacred the scouts, fed Faye alive to dogs, forced Eldians into Titans, robbed him of his freedom, and murdered his mother, made it so clear at the Eldian Rights meeting that peace was impossible, Eren still waited patiently at the declaration of war, waited for their cup to brim. Tybur had the responsibility and agency to choose to not sin and overflow the cup. But people might say that if Tybur made peace with Paradis at the festival, Eren would still be forced to transform since they surrounded him at the basement. Firstly, I could have sworn that was an anime-only edition. In the manga, there were no Marley soldiers about to interrupt Eren and Reiner's conversation, meaning Tybur making peace would not result in Eren being forced to transform. Secondly, chapter 88 Eren says, if someone who holds the power of one of the 9 titans dies without anyone inheriting that power, then the power of that titan is suddenly inherited by a baby belonging to the subjects of Ymir. Distance plays no factor in this at all, and neither do blood relations. If we can safely assume that Marley does not want to search the entire planet for a founding titan baby, in the situation that Eren does not transform because Tybur did not declare war and he was surrounded by soldiers, the Marleyans would just capture him, not kill him. Meaning Tybur making peace would not result in Eren being forced to transform. See what I mean? Tybur had the responsibility to not declare war on innocent people. So why is Eren and Paradis the one expected to do the right thing in this situation? I get it. It's because of the 2,000-year Eldian history. We might say that the cup of iniquity argument could be turned back on the Eldians. 2,000 years, the cup of iniquity of the Eldian Empire. But I tell you that they already drank their cup. The Eldian Empire was gone. The Eldians on Paradis Island had nothing to do with the Eldian Empire 100 years ago. Paradis had an entirely different cup of iniquity. They were innocent. Their cup was clean of sin. But the outside world had everything to do with the current racism towards Eldians. Their cup was filling up with sin. 100 years for their cup to brim, then they were given the truth. After that, did they seek for peace or war? Clean their brimming cup of sin or sin some more? The world overflowing their cup led to their judgment day. Oh, but Serenity! Eren was clearly referred to as the devil in this story. The devil who attacked Willy at the declaration of war. Just look at the visual imagery. So which is it? Was Eren God or the devil? Simple. Chapter 106, Yelena says, a titan known in fear by the world as a devil, but he looked like something else entirely to me. A god. He took us in when we were powerless and showed us hope. Can you see how these words can apply to Floch's view of Eren in chapter 130? If Yelena can view Zeke as a god despite him being an Eldian devil, then in the story you can view Eren as having played both god and the devil. Chapter 88, Kruger tells Grisha, there's no such thing as truth in this world. That is our reality. Anyone can become a god or a devil. All it takes is for someone to claim it for it to be true. For on Paradis, that island of devils, the devil they looked up to the most would have been their god who delivered them from their persecution and oppression.
Though parody viewed Eren as the devil, he was their Messiah, the one who took on all the sins of the world for their sake, their Christ the Savior. And before I start, yes, I know you're not supposed to take the Book of Revelations literally, but I'll do it for this case since I'm comparing it to AOT. I also know the end of days and the judgment day are different, but for AOT's sake, they might as well be the same.
Revelations chapter 5 verse 6. Then I saw a lamb that looked as if it had been slaughtered, but it was now standing between the throne and the 4 living beings, and among the 24 elders. He had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which represent the 7-fold Spirit of God that is sent out into every part of the earth. Revelations chapter 5 verse 7. He stepped forward and took the scroll from the right hand of the one sitting on the throne. The scroll had 7 seals, and no one on heaven and earth was worthy enough to break the seals and open it. No one but the Lamb. Chapter 122, can you see how Eren was special? He broke the chains of paths. And in 2000 years, no one but Eren could have broken the unbreakable cycle of hatred. Book of Revelations, the Lamb breaking the seals meant starting the apocalypse. Chapter 122, in 2000 years, no one but Eren could have freed Ymir. And after breaking her out of her slave mentality, they brought about the apocalypse. Skip forward a bit. Revelations chapter 6 verse 12 to 17. I watched as the Lamb broke the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun became as dark as black cloth, and the moon became red as blood. Then the stars of the sky fell to the earth like green figs falling from a tree shaken by a strong wind. The sky was rolled up like a scroll, and all the mountains and islands were moved from their places. Then everyone, the kings of the earth, the rulers, the generals, the wealthy, the powerful, and every slave and free person, all hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they cried to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of the one who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of the wrath has come, and who is able to survive?" Ymir, as the founder, was God, and Eren was Paradis's Messiah. Now, does this mean that Eren has to die in the ending, being Christ and all? I'll explain that specific detail in a later video about Noah's Ark. But for now, no, he won't die. Why would Eren die? He regained the will to live through Historia and Carla. His desire to live is still present even post-time skip. And besides, Eren already did die, back in the Uprising arc. When he wanted to rid his old pathetic self, he forced himself to be reborn as a new person. Basically, chapter 65 was the crucifixion with his crown of thorns and cross, complete with the resurrection when Armin lifted Eren up from his rice tomb. Chapter 130, the rumbling was not the death of Christ, but the second coming of Christ. Hence the need to hide from the face of God and from the wrath of the sacrificed lamb. Eren was Paradis's Messiah. Now, if you believe that everything I said here was a stretch, let me just say, if a particular ending defender used the 5 stages of grief to defend Mikasa's random importance to Ymir's random love story for her tyrant pedophile rapist, then it's not a stretch to use the biblical apocalypse to talk about another apocalypse. Especially when Isayama used the first sin imagery. But continuing on, like I said, all a matter of perspective. Eren was Paradis's god and devil who saved them from the outside world. To the outside world, he would have been the god who brought down his judgment upon them. But if you didn't want to view Eren as God who waited for Willy to sin by declaring war, fine, let's use the devil and villain perspective. View it as this: Eren played God when he was waiting, then played the devil when he attacked. Chapter 122, the founder Ymir was God. Read the Book of Revelations and you can view Ymir as the God who allowed the devil Eren Yeager to bring ruin upon the world. Revelations chapter 13 verse 1 to 2. Then I saw a beast rising out of the sea. It had 7 heads and 10 horns, with 10 crowns on its horns. And written on each head were names of blaspheme God. This beast looked like a leopard, but it had the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave the beast his own power and throne and great authority. 2000 years Ymir waited before allowing the devil to rise from the sea. So the rumbling was the outside world's judgment day. The apocalypse in the book of Revelations was hinted in the book of Matthew in chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24 verse 15 to 22, New International Version. Jesus talks about the end of the world. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. The abomination that causes desolation is the Antichrist. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. The rumbling was the outside world's judgment day. But we might say that in the book of Revelations, God stopped the devil. But in the story of AOT, Eren played both God and the devil. And chapter 122, the founding titan Ymir was God. If God stopped the devil, then the two people who could stop Eren was Eren himself or founder Ymir. So, I have to quickly address the argument where we say the ending makes sense because of this, saying Armin was the Messiah and Ymir was the god that stopped the devil. Number 1, Armin's delusional Messiah complex does not make him Messiah. If anything, he was actually a false prophet because he wasn't the one that killed Eren. It was Mikasa. Eren taking on all the sins of the world through the rumbling and destroying the old heaven and earth for a new world made Eren the Messiah. Number 2, Armin giving Eren a book 10 years ago does not make Armin a devil. Armin sharing the burden of Eren's genocide is not valid since he did not know Eren would do something this extreme. Number 3, I already talked about this in a Historia video, but basically, Ymir betraying Eren and shifting her loyalty midway through the rumbling was because her character was retconned to make Mikasa the chosen one. The Ymir I refer to is the one that was not retconned, the one that was a victim, the one that would have continued being loyal to Eren because he freed her in chapter 122. So no, there would be no one to stop Eren's rumbling, because Eren, the god and devil, would not stop himself. And the founder Ymir, the god, would have always been on Eren's side so she could achieve her freedom, her non-retconned idea of freedom. And narratively speaking, why should the rumbling stop? Go 100% and chapter 130, Eren would fulfill his goal of ending the cycle of revenge born from hate. His freedom would be achieved because he would be able to see the scenery of Armin's book without being persecuted and oppressed. Go 100% rumbling, and chapter 133, Paradise's fate won't be left up to chance. Go 100% rumbling, and you keep Eren a villain to the very end by not forcing him to half-ass genocide for the sake of a last-minute redemption. Refer to chapter 131, Eren's walk in Marley. Very soon now, they will all be dead. No, I am going to kill them. That I will kill them is already set, which means we also never found a way for Parody to survive. All of this will be wiped out. The homes, the people, the animals, the lives, the dreams. Matthew chapter 24 verse 1 to 2. Sure, you can interpret this as 70 AD Jerusalem, but surely this also meant the complete destruction of the old world to make way for the new Jerusalem. As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he responded, "Do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth, they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." 100 years worth of sin led to this moment. The consequence of their final sin at the festival is the outside world being completely destroyed. The rumbling was their judgment day. Now, call me crazy, but wasn't all of this happening because of the sins of the father? The question was asked, should Eldians be punished for the sins of their father? Eren answered 3 times, no. Chapter 121. At the rice cave, Eren waited and listened. It was only when he overheard that his people would die for sins that were not theirs, that he became the devil who rebelled against God. In his anger, he reflected their hatred back onto the family, killed even the innocent children. Chapter 100. At the festival, Eren waited and listened. If he played God and waited for the cup of iniquity to overflow, he would choose again to become the devil when they cheered for the death of his people. Yet it was only after they made violence the only answer did the devil erupt from the bowels of that basement. Reflected their hatred back onto them, killed even their innocent children. Chapter 107. Back in Parody, Eren asked Hanji for another way. Stayed in prison for 1 month when he could have easily escaped using the Warhammer. Like the other times, Eren waited and listened. Since the world cornered them like rats, he resorted to the rumbling and became the devil of Parody. When the outside world wished for the extinction of his people, he reflected their hatred back onto them, killed even their innocent children. Notice how the deaths of Zofia and Udo share similarities to Ramsey and Halil. 2 died by flying debris and the other 2 were trampled, the result of the sin at the declaration of war, foretelling their end of days. Let me repeat, if the question was, should the sins of the father be burdened by their children, Eren would have always said no. But then people might say, oh, then why is Eren killing children of the outside world if he believed the parents' sins should not be burdened by their children? Chapter 131. That's also the reason why Eren cried to Ramsay. Not because humanity just existed, but because Eren knew he would be forced into doing the rumbling, as the world would never make peace with parody. And since parody had nothing to do with the Eldian Empire 100 years ago, why would they drink from Karl Fritz's cup and die for the Eldian Empire's sin? Eren would never allow that to happen. So, by the outside world committing their final sin of declaring genocidal war on the Paradisians, they doomed themselves. They condemned innocent children like Ramsay to die when Eren inevitably retaliated. So stop blaming Eren for everything regarding the rumbling, since the rumbling was the outside world's consequence for continuing the cycle of hatred.